thank you. Unfortunately, I do not speak Portuguese, so hopefully you would be able to understand my English. Really excited to be here today. It's actually the first time that I'm doing this kind of presentation. And if it will be working okay, I probably will write a book based on that. So maybe a couple of years down the future, you will be able to see my book and say to yourself, "Wait a minute, I heard that someplace." So hopefully this is going to be the case. I don't know exactly how much time we have. I usually being able to stay longer than everyone else. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to stop me during the presentation and ask, and I'll be happy to answer them. And if we need sometimes a break, then let me know, because otherwise I can go probably until really late. By the way, my email, uri@vx.com, I do answer all of my emails, not necessarily the same day, but I do eventually answer them. So if you'll email me, then you will get answers. So a couple of things that we'll be speaking tonight, and then we also have a session tomorrow morning. By the way, is this usually the case? So you have over the weekend 2 sessions, Friday and Saturday, and during the week you are working? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So tonight we'll speak about entrepreneurship in general, and then the Waze story. And this is part of the story, and maybe tomorrow we'll have another part of the story. A little bit about disruption, a little bit about fundraising. Who is going to build a startup, or who is already built a startup here? Raise your hand. So this is going to be very interesting for you, right? And in particular, maybe even more interesting tomorrow when we'll speak about practices. And so fundraising, a little bit about sharing economy and the different concepts of sharing economy. And then we will finish up the day with some food for thought about startup strategy. And then tomorrow we'll discuss product market fit and go-to-market strategy, and how to recruit people, and DNA and leadership and CEO and different things that are very, very critical for a startup to be successful. But as you will figure that out, it's also critical for any business to be successful. So tomorrow is a little bit more practice than today. And some stories about startups that I had or experienced, about hardship that we had throughout the journey, and about failures that we had. And probably I will need to keep on update those, because hardships keep on piling up, and the failures also. So a few words about myself. I'm a serial entrepreneur, actually a serial parallel entrepreneur. So I kind of building parallel startups at the same time. Focus only on consumer services. So imagine Waze as a consumer services, imagine Move It as a consumer services, and most of them are such that I'm looking for a problem that it's worth solving. And if I solve that, then I create a bigger impact, or creating a lot of value to a lot of people. And they're all about doing good, right? So all about creating value for consumers. And I would usually start about 1 or 2 a year. Sometimes it's even better than that. So this year I already have 2, and probably by the end of the year I might have another one. So even more than 2 sometimes. By the way, there is a thinner version of me in the picture. So here are some. Waze. We are all familiar with Waze. Anyone here is not using Waze? Okay, so thank you for that. And so Waze, everyone is familiar with. It's essentially very interesting because it's a social network of drivers, that all the drivers are combined together and helping the rest of the drivers to avoid traffic jams and speeding tickets. Right? So 2 very important things. Move It. Move It is like Waze, but for public transportation. actually answering the same question that Waze does. How do I get from here to wherever I want to go right now, but using public transportation? And the interesting things about Move It, it's actually growing faster than Waze at the time. And so if you look at Waze at the age of 5 and Move It at the age of 5, Move It is actually has more users and even bigger impact than Waze at the time. PUCRS deals with the biggest secret in the world, financial fees. In the US alone, there are $600 billion of financial fees every year, 600 billion. Now the problem is that people don't even know that they're paying them. And so if I would be in the US right now and I would ask 100 people how much fees you are paying on your retirement account or on your brokerage account, if I will find one person that knows, that's our lucky day. And so if no one knows, that's a secret, right? And when you realize that this is pretty significant, and if you just think of, let's say, 1% a year is not a big deal. If this is your retirement account and you accumulate that with the compound effect year after year after year after year, it's going to end up as 1/3 of your lifetime saving. Now, this is a lot of money. Now, we built that because 2008 was a terrible year on the market. In the beginning of 2009, I get my annual statement on my retirement plan. And in addition to lose 20% on the market, they also charge me 1.5% fees for losing money, essentially, right? And I was upset. I was really upset, not with the fact that they actually charged me money, but with the fact that I didn't know. And then I started to ask my friends how much fees they're paying, and none of them knew. And I decided that this is going to be the startup that I'm going to build after Waze. And this is exactly what we did. So essentially helping people to understand how much they're paying and how to reduce their fees dramatically. Rumor is a marketplace for non-refundable hotel reservations. So just imagine that you're making travel plans and you make hotel reservation and you change your plans and you get stuck with reservations that you cannot use. And today you actually throw the money down the drain, right? So essentially you can actually sell the reservation to someone else and recover some of the losses, yes. During the process of thinking of a startup, you realize how you're going to make money, and probably that will change many times before you'll get there. But in general, if you find a big problem and you try to address that and solve that, then you will figure out a way to make money out of that, right? So if you solve a big problem, you obviously create a lot of value. If you create a lot of value, you will figure out how to monetize that. And so with PUCRS, we had our own thoughts at the beginning, and obviously we changed that over time. But pretty much all the companies, they are very likely to change their business models throughout their journey. Zik is another marketplace, a marketplace for store credit. So imagine that you return something to the store, and you get a store credit that you can use within this chain. Turns out that 30% of those are never being used, right? So 30% of those, it's $100 billion a year of real money that goes down the drain. And so Zik is a marketplace for that, a mobile instant marketplace that you can actually sell that to someone else for real money and use that instead of having sort of a gift card or a store credit that you're not going to use or that you're not using. NG deals with the frustrations of going to the mechanic. If I will take my car to the mechanic, whatever they'll say, I'll say okay, because I don't know, right? So if they will tell me, you need to replace the carburetor in your car, then I will say, okay, go ahead and replace the carburetor in the car, right? The only problem is that there is no carburetor in my car, right? So they don't make cars with carburetors for like 2 decades now. But I have no clue. So NG is an app running on the smartphones, connects to the car computer, doing the diagnostics for you, telling you what's wrong, and then asking mechanics to quote to repair that. So empower the driver not only with the knowledge, but also with the ability to do price comparison. Because today you can't, right? You go to the mechanic and they say, okay, leave the car here. And they call you around probably 15 minutes before the end of the day, and they tell you, okay, you need to replace the carburetor, right, or whatever. Fairfly deals with the biggest secret in the travel industry, and this is what happened to airfare after you book your flight. Now, no one checks that, right? Before, we are very smart buyers, right? So we compare prices, we go to the website, we compare multiple airlines or multiple alternatives, and we watch that over time, and we see that prices are going up and down. And then we make the reservation. And then what? Prices actually are keep on going up and down, but we never check that, right? So Fairfly, monitor your own itinerary, and if the price drops and drops below cancellation fees, then it basically tells you right now you're leaving money on the table. You can rebook the same flight, or maybe rebook an alternative flight at a cheaper price. So imagine in this industry, in the travel industry, that as soon as online travel agencies were introduced, then they enabled us to do price comparison between the time that we decide that we want to fly until we make the reservation. But in average, there is 40 days between the decision and between the making the reservation until we actually fly. And so Fairfly enables price comparison here as well. Spam Off deals with SMS spam. And for now, it's only in Israel, but it's based on the regulation in Israel that basically say that sending SMS spam is illegal. And if you're sending one, then the recipient might sue you for about 1,000 rial compensation. So the regulation was there, and no one was using that. And so Spam Off essentially built a system that enable consumers to actually very fast claim their penalty or claim their compensation through the system. And all of a sudden what happened is that a lot of users starting to claim their compensation, and the result is that spam actually stopped. So you make it expensive, it stopped. In most of the cases, yes. This one is very unique because it's my son that is running that. And so I said, you know, the fact that he wants to build a startup that is doing something good, I'm going to start that without actually looking into the market opportunity globally. And there are some regulations in some other places, but not in all the places. So we will pivot that into someplace else. We will keep the system as public service, and we will pivot that into another regulation that doesn't work. So entrepreneurship, you know, it usually would start with a very, very strong emotion, very strong feeling. So it usually would be either love or hate, right? So I would run into something that I really like, or I would run into something that I don't like, and I would start to question myself, why is that so? Or how can we change that? Or am I the only person that actually have this problem? And as soon as I realized that this is a problem that is worth solving, I would start to build the dream and the passion around that, and I will tell myself that this is what I'm going to do. And immediately after that, there is a realization that you are going to sacrifice a lot of things, right? So if you're going to go into this journey, there are many other things that you will not be able to do, right? So you'll need to quit the current job, right? You wouldn't have time for family. You wouldn't have time for friends. You wouldn't have time to anything else except fulfilling your destiny. And the journey is a roller coaster journey, right? So there are ups and downs and ups and downs. And sometimes the frequency of them and the amplitude of them is dramatic, right? So at the same day, at the morning, you would think that you're actually making it, and at the end of the day, you would go home crying because it doesn't work, right? And so one of the largest venture capitals in Silicon Valley, Andreessen Horowitz, Ben Horowitz used to be a CEO, and once he was asked, are you sleeping well at night as a CEO? And he said, oh yeah, I slept like a baby. I woke up every 2 hours and cried. And that's the reality, right? So the journey is very, very, you know, the differences between the parts of the journey are dramatic. And at the same time, no doubt what's next. So if you're an entrepreneur, And someone will ask you, what are you going to do after this startup? It's always the next startup. And in most cases, people know what their next startup is all about. So I want you to imagine building a startup exactly like falling in love. Right? So if you're building a startup, at the beginning there are many, many ideas that you think of. And eventually you pick one, or you go to many dates, and eventually you pick one and you say to yourself, okay, she is the one, or this is the idea that I'm going to work on. And at the beginning, you only spend time with the idea. And this is, by the way, where you think of the problem, the users, the solution, the business model, everything. Right? So you figure out everything during this period of time, or you only want to spend time with your new date, right? You don't want to see anyone else until you feel confident enough. And then you start telling your friends about your idea. And usually they will tell you, that will never work, right? Or this is the stupidest idea that I ever heard, right? I heard that many times. I think that today people don't say that anymore, but at the beginning they used to say that a lot, right? Or you take your date for the first time to meet your friends, and they are saying, she's not for you, right? And this is usually when you disengage from your friends, because you are in love with the idea, you are in love with what you're doing, and you don't want to listen to anyone else. Now, the good news is that you are in love, and you don't listen to them. The bad news is that you're in love, and you don't listen to them. But this is the reality, right? And I would say that for life, right? If you don't love what you're doing, then do yourself a favor and find something that you do love. Because otherwise, you sentence yourself for suffering, and you should be happy. And the journey is very long, right? In particular, so at the beginning, there is a lot of excitement and a lot of creation. Maybe someone writing on the paper, and it seems to be beautiful. But then the realization is that it simply doesn't work. There is a long period of time of lack of traction. And you try different things, and it still doesn't work, and you keep on trying that. And it's a very, very long part. So I want you to imagine for a second that we are trying to cross a desert, right? And the desert is pretty big, right? And so you would walk all day in the desert, and it's only sand around you. And you will go to sleep and wake up in the morning, and there is only sand around you. And you don't feel that you're making progress. But in reality, you do make progress. Slow, but persistent and consistent. And this is what is going to take you through the lack of traction period. You keep on walking the same direction, you keep on trying, you keep on hammering it until you realize that you're actually at the end of the desert. And the journey itself is a journey of failures. And this is very, very important. So in reality, we're trying to do something new that no one did before. And so even though that we want to believe that we know exactly what we are doing, we don't. And so we try something, and it doesn't work, and we try something else, and it doesn't work, and we keep on trying different things until we find the first thing that works. And essentially, it only buys us the ticket to the next part of the journey, right? So if the first part of the journey will be around product market fit, so let's make sure that we are actually creating value in what we are doing. Then the next part of the journey would be, so how do I scale, or how do I go global, or how do I make money, right? And when you get to this phase, it's a journey by itself, and it's a journey of failures, because you're trying to do something new, and no one did that before, so you don't know exactly how to do that, and you try different things. And to a certain extent, I would say, if you're afraid to fail, then in reality, you already failed, because you're not going to try. Now, part of the differences between cultures is actually the fear of failures, right? And if in this culture the fear of failure is high, then less people are willing to try. And if in different places fear of failure is much lower, then more people are willing to try. Now, in reality, Israel has a very, very low fear of failure. And the result is that there are many startups that start every year. Actually, probably more than in Brazil. And Israel is a small place. And so remember that if you're afraid to fail, then in reality you already failed, because you're not going to go into this journey. And it doesn't matter if this is building a startup or doing something that you're afraid to fail. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're afraid to fail, in reality you already failed. So the first year is very, very dramatic. And so I wanted to say at the beginning that if you want a copy of the deck, then I'll be happy to email that, but I see that you already got a copy of the deck. So, but still, if you want, email me, I'll email you the presentation. So the first year is very dramatic because it sets the tone for pretty much the remainder of the journey. And in particular, we think of, okay, this is what we're going to do, right? So we're going to help drivers to avoid traffic jams, right? Or we're going to help people to reduce their financial fees, or we're going to help people to feel helpless at the mechanic. And you define the value proposition and the mission that you have. But the day that you start, you're also starting a working place. And it's up to you to decide the DNA of this place. Because if you don't, by the end of the first year, this place will have a DNA of itself. It will have a business culture. It will have the kind of people that are already there. And it's your opportunity to make it the best working place you ever had. But you need to think about it up front, because you need to define it and then follow that guidelines that you set to yourself. This is the kind of place I would like to work in. In particular, when you realize that if this is a startup, you're going to spend a lot of hours there. And a lot of people are going to follow you. And you want them to be in the best working place they ever had as well. And so it's an opportunity that you have to think about it, because if you don't, this place or this startup will have a business culture of its own, or a DNA of its own, and not necessarily the one that you wanted. A lot of people come to me and say, okay, I have this great idea, and then there are many things that I do to them. And one of them is I tell them, okay, so if you're successful, how the market will change? And so who will be out of business if you're successful? Now, if you don't know to answer that, then maybe the impact is not that big. Maybe it's less significant than you think it is. Or maybe you haven't thought through towards the end of this journey. And so really, if you want to make an impact, then describe the impact. Then tell yourself how the world is going to be a better place if you are successful. And this is very, very dramatic. If you don't know that, if you don't have that, then the impact is not yet in your head, or maybe it's not even there. And the other part of it is that you need to celebrate a lot of things. So if the journey is a journey of failures, then every time that we have even small success, we would like to celebrate that. I want you to imagine the budget of a startup as a lion's share goes to paying people salaries, right? And then we have marketing and operation and cafeteria. We need to celebrate a lot of things. And so we will celebrate the first employee, the first user, the first version, the first office, the first everything. And then we will start, okay, the 10th users and the 100th users and the 1,000th users and so forth. But much better than that, if someone is suing you for patent infringements, that actually means that someone cares, that you're starting to make an impact and someone cares. And by the way, so one of my startups a couple of months ago, they got a letter of cease and desist. And so the CEO called me and said, I know that I need to celebrate, but what do I do next? And I said, wait a minute, I'm coming for the celebration, and then I'll tell you what we do next. And in reality, if someone is suing you for patent infringement, then you should sue them back for patent infringement as well. And now we are on common ground and we can start a dialogue. The best is when people come and say thank you for what you have done for them. Then you know that you have created value. Because most people, they take that for granted. But when they come and say thank you, then you know that you have created something that is great. And I was lucky to have a lot of people with, by the way, this is why I focus on consumer services. I want to have direct interaction with the users, and I want to hear them. I want to hear them when they bitch, and I want to hear them when they say thank you. Because this is how I can actually improve and how I can build better products. So if I would summarize just for a second, abstractive way of looking at building a startup. So we're looking for a problem. We're looking for a big problem. We're looking for a problem that it's worth solving. And then we define the problem, and we're starting to look for the users of that problem. So who has this problem? And we start to imagine them, right? And after we imagine them, we go and we speak with them in order to understand their perception of the problem. Because if we don't, then we are building a product that is based on our own experience, and we are amazing sample of one person. And so we think we understand how other people think of the problem. Simply go and ask them, and then understand what's the perception of the problem. The perception of the problem is even more important than the real problem, because this is what other people think about that, and this is how we will need to address that for them. And when we will promote our service, we will tell them, your perception of the problem is exactly what we are solving. And only then we go and build a solution. So if we will try to build a solution before we understand the problem, we might end up with a solution that is looking for a problem. And maybe no one has this problem. Right? If I would be the only person on the planet that has this problem, then I would recommend a shrink, a good one. Right? But if a lot of people actually have this problem, then I would say, okay, let's build something that addresses that. But we need to understand the user perception of the problem. Today we are using Waze as users, and we think about it, okay, this is pretty amazing service for us as drivers to find where we would like to go and to avoid traffic jams and find the fastest route and so forth. But the magic of Waze is that we, the users, are also the creators of the data. So when we started, this blank page was the map of Tel Aviv, and that was the map of Porto Alegre and São Paulo and everywhere else in the world where we started. Blank page. There was nothing on the map. And when the first driver drove, we collected the GPS data, and if we would draw that on this blank page, it would look something like that. Now, if we start to take that from a lot of drivers, we are starting to get something that looks like a map, right? If I will tell you that this is a traffic circle here, it looks like a traffic circle, and it is a traffic circle. And you can see that, okay, this one looks like Main Street compared to this one. And if there is an intersection that no one is making left turn, then no left turn is allowed. And if there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and no one else coming the other direction, that will be one-way street. And if there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and only 2 coming the other direction, that will be one-way street in Tel Aviv. So this is how we drive. Please consider that when you come to drive there. But in reality, anyone here has a computer science background? Okay, so for us, it's very simple, right? If I can describe, then we can build it. If I can describe it, we can build it. And I just described how to take the data and create a map out of that. And so this is exactly what we built. We built a system that takes all of this GPS data from the devices and automatically create the map. And the map is incomplete. In order to make the map more complete, then we built map editing tools to allow users to provide us with street names and house numbers and points of interest. So the map became fairly complete. So the entire map was created by the drivers. Crowdsource of everything. Now at this phase, if we will have someone that is driving slow, then we can figure out that there is actually a traffic jam here. And if we have... So this is an excellent question. I would answer that in a second. And obviously, if we have a lot of drivers all over, then we can figure out where all traffic jams are and route people to avoid them. Now, at this phase, so what we're actually going to see in this video is how the map was created. Hopefully, we'll see that. So we don't see that. So if you'll go into YouTube, into this link, you'll see how the map was created. But essentially, in this video is how the map was created in a few places, from blank page into, I would say, a good enough map in like 6 months or so. Now, that was an excellent question. So what's the value for the first user if there is nothing there, right? The real question should be, who was the first user? Because the first users were enthusiastic amateurs, or people that they care about GPS or GIS or maps, and they like the concept that they can actually build their own maps and that they can control their own destiny and that they can fix the map in different places. And as soon as they started, over a short period of time, the map became good enough in their area. And this is where they started to tell their friends, and their friends started to use that. And so obviously the path where the map was not good enough until it becomes good enough was based on the concentration of people. And the good news is that in major metropolitan areas, it happens faster. And very possible that there are still areas that maybe there are very few people there, and we might not even have them on the map, right? If there is no users, then we don't have them on the map. Or possibly, areas that have no data coverage, then we actually don't have the map. And so this is very important because the concept of crowdsource essentially creates amazing data where you have concentrations of users and no data elsewhere, very differently. Okay. So different countries have different culture. I will essentially speak about it when I'll get to go-to-market strategies. But the differences in different countries, we actually anticipated them, because usually that will be based on the size of the problem or the perception of the problem, the size of the addressable market, and on the other side, what other alternatives are available, right? And so
the market research first.
You don't need to. At the end of the day, you start working on that, and you figure out. You're doing your own research to figure that out. But just giving you an example, when we started Waze in Brazil in 2011, there were nearly no one has navigation system there, right? So the competitive landscape was very favorable for us. And even though that we were not good enough at the beginning, the free and available versus expensive and nearly not available played to our favor. So when we started Waze, we thought that our business model is going to be that we have an amazing factory of creating maps, so we will be selling maps, right? And we have amazing factory to create traffic information, so we will be selling traffic information. But over time, we realized that advertisement is much better business model for us, and we started that in 2012. And the company, Google, acquired us in 2013. So we already had a working business model, but not dramatic. Today, it's actually pretty dramatic. So the journey itself, right? And there were two concepts that collide here. One was coming from the CTO of Waze, Hoodshop Tai, and he actually built the first version of Waze running on a PDA. And that version was actually able to map as you drive, so the creation of the map. Now PDA, do you even remember what a PDA is, right? So I see some young faces here. So long time ago, there were dinosaurs, and then PDAs, and then Nokia phones, and this is where we are today, right? So today we are all having iPhones or Android phones, and less than 10 years ago, there was something completely different, right? So PDAs were just evolving into smartphones, the first smartphones, BlackBerries and Nokias. And since then, PDAs disappeared. Nokia barely disappeared. And I want you to think about it for a second. So that means that in the next 10 years, it's possible that iPhones and Android phones will disappear? Actually, it's very likely that this is what will happen. Now, the only problem is that we don't know who is going to replace them, because if we would actually build it today, right? Or sell short on them, right? So Ehud Shabtai, the CTO, came with the concepts of we can create map as we drive. And when we met in 2007, we said, let's do more than that. Let's take that into the smartphone so we can generate real-time traffic. And then we can help people on their daily commute rather than just going someplace that they don't know how to get. And so 2007, we decided that we're going to build Waze. We were 3 founders, Ehud, Amir, and myself, and they were the engineering, and I was the business side. And you know, at the beginning, we told the story to ourselves until we actually fall in love with the story. And then we started to tell other people about the story, and usually they said that will never work, right? And then we went fundraising. And so you go to Israel, there are a lot of venture capitals, and so we go to the first one, and I knew most of them because I was quite experienced, and that was not the first startup, and I already had working with a lot of startups before, so I knew most of the venture capitals in Israel. And I come to the first meeting, I present them the concept, and they said no. And I go to the next one, and they said no, and no, and no, and no, and no. A lot of times I heard no. And eventually, only in 2008, we were able to raise capital, and this is where we started the company. March 2008, we raised $12 million in capital, and we started the company. And so two thoughts, right? You have an idea and it's wrong, right? The more, the merrier. It's always going to take more efforts, more time than you think it is. Hopefully tomorrow I will try to build a little bit of the focus of the different phases of the strategy and when to spend what, because usually it takes longer than you think it is, and so you need more runway. And so if you have an opportunity to raise more, raise more. So we had a version running on a PDA. The map was not good enough. It was maybe okay in some areas in Tel Aviv, but definitely not good enough.
You were used at this moment?
They were so we promoted that on a forum, and we had like 700 users, right? And so a few hundreds of users, and it was growing by 50 every month, right? So nothing significant in that sense, but actually proof of concept that the model works, that you can actually through crowdsource create the map. And so beginning of 2008, we were a team of 3 essentially, and we started the company, and we started to build the first version running on smartphone, and the first version was running on Nokia phone, right? So because that was the most popular smartphone in Israel and actually in the world at the time. And then, so beginning of 2009, we launched the product in Israel, and we already had a few thousands of users, maybe even 10,000 or so.
Where did you start? Sorry, where did you start? Where?
We started in Israel because Waze was based in Israel. And you always start in your home place because this is where you can learn faster. This is where you can actually collect feedback faster. And you always start there. And then it was working beautifully in Israel, and we already had tens of thousands of users, and it was starting to grow, and we did PR, and it was starting to grow even faster, and turns out to be good enough in Israel, and we decided that we're going to take that to other places. And so later that year, 2009, we launched that everywhere, right? And so we made that available globally, in 2010, this is what happened, right? So we had a lack of traction. Anyone here is using Waze since 2010? No one, right? And if you would, you would probably quit because of what you said earlier, right? It was not good enough. And so you will try, and you would like the story, and it wouldn't be good enough, and you would quit. And this is essentially what happened in a lot of places. It was not good enough. So it was actually good enough in few places in Eastern Europe, in the Czech Republic and Slovakia and Latvia. It was actually good enough in Ecuador and starting to become good enough in Colombia. But in other places, it was not good enough. And so what we have experienced is that people download the app because they hear the story and the story makes sense. We, the drivers, are creating a social network of drivers, and we're going to fight traffic jams together. So beautiful, right? So let's download that and try. And then you realize that your home is not even on the map, right? Or you ask a route from your home, which is on the map, to your office, and instead of getting a route that tells you, okay, this is how you should go, it gives you a route that goes like that, right? It's something awkward, right? So something doesn't work there. And the reason was that the map was not good enough, and we didn't have enough users there, and in a lot of cases we had a lot of issues with the software that we needed to fix. And so what happened at this phase is that we realized that it's not good enough, and we started to collect data from the system on one hand and from the drivers on the other hand to understand what doesn't work. And we take all of this feedback and we build the next version that we know that addresses everything, and we launch the next version and we know that this is it, and it's not. And we keep on going iteration after iteration after iteration after iteration after iteration until we got it to the level of that it's becoming good enough. And it's only happened in 2011. Now, if you are using Waze here since 2011, very likely that it was actually already good enough. Or towards the end of the year, it turns to become good enough. And so 2011, we figure out how to make it work. And we started to see that it's becoming good enough in the US, one metropolitan at a time, right? So first of all, Los Angeles, and then San Francisco, and Chicago, and Atlanta, and Washington, D.C., and one metro after that. And in Europe, that was Italy first, and then Netherlands, and France, and Sweden, and Spain, and one country after that. And here in Latin America, it was actually Chile first, and then it was Colombia and Brazil and Mexico and one country after that. And even here in Brazil, it was Sao Paulo first, and then Rio, and then one metro after that. And as soon as it happens, then we know that we figured that out. But getting there was crossing the desert for us, was very, very hard. And part of it was that we ran out of cash throughout this period of time of trying to cross the desert, right? And so running out of supply in the middle of the desert is not a good idea. So, entrepreneurs, they don't give up, even when they should. They simply don't give up because they are essentially in love of what they are doing, right? So they are so much captured into their doing that they're not going to give up, even if they should have. And there were points of time that we were going home crying, but never giving up. And then 2012, Waze was actually growing faster than the entire industry together. So you take all the navigation devices and the navigation applications and the in-car navigation systems, and Waze was actually growing faster than all of them combined. And then 2013, Google came up with a proposal to acquire us, and we simply said yes. And I left. I left the day after the acquisition in order to build my next startup, right? Actually, I was already in the doing of my next startup, and so that was a great opportunity for me to move on. Most of the other stayed there. So this is maybe the most important slide of the day. So when we are about to build a startup, these are maybe the most important tips that I have for you. And the first one is understanding who are the users and what's their perception of the problem. We spoke about that, but this is critical. If we don't do that, if we don't understand their user perception of the problem, then we are going to build the wrong product. And if we're building the wrong product, then it's going to be much harder to figure out how to fix that. If we understand the user perception of the problem at the beginning, then we are very likely to build maybe not good enough product, but close to good enough product at the beginning. Making mistakes fast. So there are two aspects for that. One is, in order for us to become a market leader, we need to move faster than everyone else. Now, in order to move faster, we need to make the mistake. We need to do the tries that we are doing. We need to try different things fast, because then we can fix them fast, and we are essentially building a cadence that is faster than everyone else in the industry. So I want you to think of when to launch the product today. Right? If you're waiting, you are waiting too much. In reality, you should be embarrassed with the quality of the first product that you launch, because only after you launch you start learning, and we can then build the right product faster. So essentially, I would say product development starts after you launch. Before you launch, you are sitting in the lab with your own point of view, or maybe a team of people point of view, and you're not making any progress. You only start to make progress after you launch. Now, the different aspects of that, of moving fast enough, is let me try it this way. So here's a story about two guys that are going on a safari in the jungle, in Africa someplace, and after a few nights that they are sleeping at the lodge there, and they are seeing wild animals and very excited, they say, let's do something more risky, more dangerous, and let's spend the night in a tent outside the camp, outside the lodge. And so sure enough, they take the tent, build it outside the lodge, and during the night, in the middle of the night, there is a roar of a lion. And that sounds pretty close to them. So they woke up, and that was a very scary moment for them. And one guy said to the other guy, what shall we do? What shall we do? And the other guy say, let's run back to the lodge. Yeah, this is a good idea. And he's starting to put on his sneakers. So the other guy says, are you nuts? You really think you're going to outrun the lion? Say, no, I need to outrun you. So this is the important part of being fast enough. We need to be faster than the competition. The DNA and the mission defines the journey that we're going to have. People are not going to give up even if the journey is not their dream. But if the journey is a dream, then it's much easier to harness everyone else to follow and to fight uphill in order to get to where we want to go. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. If you fall in love with your own solution and the problem is moving, you're stuck. You're pretty sure that your solution is the right one, and it's not. If you remain focused on the problem all the time, and you ask yourself every day, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, if I'm making progress towards solving that, then you're probably moving into the right direction. Then you're actually making progress towards creating value, which is essentially solving the problem. Focus. Noga, can you stand up for a second?
Yes.
The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Very, very hard. I have that as well. Okay, cool. Very hard, right? And because in particular at the beginning, you start telling people about your thoughts and your concept, and you're already baked up with that, so you sound reasonable and logical. And people starting to telling you, but you can do that here, right? Or I will pay you if you do that for my company, right? And you have different diversions and different aspects that basically tells you that you can do a lot of things. But in reality, we're only trying to do one thing. And so focus is not about what we are doing, it's about what we are not doing. The hard choices is to say no to everything else so we can actually keep on moving into the direction that we would like to move, which is essentially is solving the problem, right? And so, and defocus is very easy. As soon as you defocus, you lose the momentum. And the last one is very dramatic. So, so because I keep on building startups, I'm looking for teams and leaders for startups all the time. And in the last year, I think I spoke with about 20 ex-CEOs, so CEOs of startups that their last startup failed. And I asked them, why did your startup fail? And half of them say the team was not right. And then I started to ask more, what does it mean the team was not right? And some of them said, okay, we had some of the people were not good enough in what they're supposed to do. And some of them say we had communication issues, right? So what I called ego management issues. And some of them say, one of them said, you know, we were 3 engineers. We all had the same skill set and we needed diversification of skill set. And so essentially different reasons. And then I asked them, when did you know that the team is not right? And all of them said within the first month. One of them said before we started. Few of them said after a few days. All of them within the first month, they knew that the team is not right. And so the problem is not that the team was not right. The problem was that the CEO didn't do the right thing or didn't make the hard decision in order to make it right and change the team, right? Now, at the end of the day, making easy decisions is easy. Making hard decisions is hard. And the CEO is the one that is expected to make the hard decisions because people don't like to make hard decisions. So within an organization, if this decision is hard, no one is going to make that decision. They're going to push it up and up and up and up until it reaches the CEO. Now, if the CEO doesn't make that hard decision, the organization is going to die. So I agree with that. You learn how to become a good CEO by practicing, right? And you really want someone to stand by your side and help you and push you towards making the hard decisions. Now, at the end of the day, you're there by yourself, right? No one is going to make the hard decision for you. But the opportunity that someone will guide you to make less mistakes and will push you to make the right decision or make the decision, not necessarily the right one. In reality, all the decisions that we are making are the right one because we don't know what it was like if we would make a different decision. And so in that sense, I think this is important. I was running Waze the first year, and I don't like to be a CEO because also the needs to deal with the day-to-day, which I don't like. And so I hired Noam to be the CEO, and that was Noam was amazing CEO, and he took the company from the second year and still running it.
But you were still like on the board for that.
I was the president for many years until the day of the acquisition. So so in most cases, people don't exercise their options until they don't exercise the options until they sell the shares, right? And even though that they can, but usually they don't because sometimes because of taxation, sometimes because of different reasons, sometimes because they need to take money out of their pocket. And so if you run the company for a long period of time and you have a lot of shareholders, then there might be an issue with registration of shares and actually need to report as a public company. This is one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is how do you make decisions, right? So essentially you create a proxy for all the optionees that they don't vote, right? So the CEO of the company vote on their behalf. So so I want you to imagine for a second, and I go back into the issue of how the team is not right. So I want you to imagine for a second that you're part of the team of maybe 10 or 20 people. And within this team, and it doesn't matter if this is an engineering team or support team or whatever team, it doesn't matter, right? Within this team, everyone knows who are the top of the class, who are the top performer, right? And who are very doing good job, but but not the top, and who are less than that and less than that, and who shouldn't be there, right? Who is not performing well enough. If you're in a team, you know that. Now imagine that you are in a startup, in a team, and you know that there is someone that shouldn't be there, that his performance are poor, right? Or maybe his attitude is poor, and this person shouldn't be there. Now there are two options, right? If the CEO doesn't do anything, there are only two options. Number one, CEO doesn't know, which means that CEO is stupid. This is not good. Number two, CEO does know and doesn't do anything. It's even worse, right? So the CEO is not the right leader. At both cases, the same is going to happen. The top performers in the team would leave. They don't want to be in a place like that, and they are the ones that have options. And so if the CEO is not, or whoever needs to make the hard decisions is not making them, the organization is going to deteriorate over time, right, and become mediocre and lesser than that, and so forth. And this is the beginning of the end.